everyone. This is update for October 7, 2024, day 957 of the war, end of the date update. Also catch up for October 6, 5 and 4. As always, I'm going to do a strategic general update, and I'm going to switch to the situation on the battlefield in Ukraine. So first, regarding economic situation, macro update, I was hoping that US Treasury is going to release their statement for September. Unfortunately, they have not. So probably that will be put off for the next video. I'm pretty sure that at that time it will be released, so we can all look together and understand sort of holistically the big picture, what's going on and where things are heading. Otherwise, I just want to quickly mention that the US labor market remains sort of where it used to be. It's not falling apart. It's doing okay. It's moving along. As I stated, there's sort of kind of freeze on hiring, but there's no firing. So situation remains pretty okay. In terms of quality, there was a release of new data in terms of increase in employment. Also, it's from Bureau of Labor Statistics, as I mentioned before. I think it's probably the least reliable source, so I'm not, I wouldn't take it at face value. But the more important part, again, also we may not take it at face value, but the quality of job growth is definitely pretty bad. Let's put it this way. Mostly it's when I mentioned before, healthcare, some social assistance, the restaurants, hotels, which are low-paying jobs. So this is not not good quality jobs, and then some government jobs. So for the most part, majority of the growth in the summary is of very low quality, is not reflective of vibrant economy that's producing things that people need and will be happy to use, that are useful. Mostly just kind of like a maintenance and low quality, like the worst kind of maintenance where where you have more healthcare workers. It really means that society is not healthy in general, right? This is not something where you want to be. And I mentioned this before, but I just want to repeat. So the same trend, basically the same trends, they continue so far. But we'll do a little bit more deeper dive in the next video with also new information, fiscal information from the US. Want to touch a little bit about Israel and what's going on there. In a nutshell, it's a stalemate where Israel probably wants to attack Iran. However, there is problem because if Iran retaliates, the consequences can be extremely negative for Israel. And I'm not even referring to nuclear bomb. Iran doesn't have yet nuclear bomb. They're moving towards that goal, but they're not there yet. The problem is that it's very clear that the Iron Dome is delusion. It's not providing protection or proper protection, and it's never actually was possible in the first place. It was more designed for attacks by, let's say, Hamas or Hezbollah, or relatively when they were at the time where they were, like, let's say 20, 30 years ago, which is, a lot less developed. Now they move forward quite a bit, but the more important, Iran has obviously moved forward much more in terms of the rocket technology and simply quantity of rockets. And so that Iron Dome was not designed to deal with this level of load or overload. Actually, good analogy is DDoS attack from computers, where you just simply overwhelm not by quality but extremely huge quantity of requests, and you simply force the system to crash. And this is something that that essentially Iran can do, because they probably send couple thousand of rockets pretty much simultaneously that will simply overwhelm Iron Dome. And not to mention, in the long run, it's extremely expensive to maintain it, and all of those rockets that are interceptor rockets, they are expensive. So it's a dead end from many angles. From economical, in the long run, you cannot continue sort of using it if, let's say, Iran or Hezbollah, whoever is attacking with a large number of rockets. Eventually, you simply, even if temporarily you're successful, in the long run you're doomed, because you will run sooner out of this interceptor rockets than opposing party will run out of their cheap, I would say, dirty cheap rockets. And so this is that's why I'm saying that Iron Dome is really dead end and was delusion. And so there's probably realization of that in Israel. And the problem is that Israel has a lot of vulnerable targets, such as oil refineries, but that's not the most important. There is also chemical plants that produce extremely toxic chemical compounds, and if those rockets hit those places, the environmental damage is going to be tremendous, especially given that those plants are in sort of, most populous, economic, vibrant parts of Israel. It's a small country, so essentially you can write off half of the country because it's going to be contaminated with extremely toxic chemicals, and not to mention that it will affect people. Essentially, it's that really, even that fact really prevents, for now at least, Israel from attacking, and that's why there is a stalemate. There's very clear that, and I mentioned before, that Iran is simply waiting out. They just buying time. They need time to develop nuclear capabilities, nuclear weapons, and obviously they're moving towards that. And so from that, you probably can conclude that the time is not on the side of Israel. And so Israel is in really difficult strategic situation in the long run. For now, they kind of okay, but in the long run, it's extremely difficult situation, and that's probably there's such a huge temptation to attack Iran and destroy nuclear capabilities right now. The problem with all of that is, in some ways, that opportunity to do that, I would say, largely has been missed, and that opportunity probably was 10, 15 years ago, not at the moment when Iran has so many missiles. So that's in a nutshell what's going on around Israel, I would say. And as I mentioned before, just a few more points on this topic is that land operation or land war is also dead end for Israel. For simple reasons I explained before, is Hezbollah will just move a little bit towards north. It's like you're hitting the water just temporarily sort of moves away from you, but then it comes back as soon as you sort of remove your, let's say, your fist, right? So this is exactly the same thing, and so essentially Israel is hitting this water from that perspective. And the final part, that the economy of Israel is really not doing well, and I would say going in very negative direction and accelerating, and it probably will be at accelerating pace. So that's why I said that Israel's position is extremely difficult in all of this. I would say I would never want to be in that position. to be fair, I don't even know how to get out of that position. So that's about Israel. I want to switch to another topic, which is more closer to Ukraine, is that Russia recalled its ambassador from the US, which is very clear sign of escalation, continuing escalation between, I would say, Russia and the US, and obviously not just US, but entire West. But in this particular case, this is obviously between US and Russia. If I want to go a little bit further, I would also say that before war started, before, let's say, Russia's invasion started, Russian invasion of Ukraine started, Russia did very similar things. They pulled their ambassadors, most of their diplomatic stuff, and so on. So I'm not saying that this is really happening there, but it's a small step in that direction. Again, I'm not trying to sort of like fearmonger or create any kind of unnecessary scare that there is something going to happen, but all it is just, it's very unambiguous. It's a step towards escalation between the two countries. That's all it is. Now let's switch to the situation on the battlefield in Ukraine. And things really continuing to deteriorate in Ukraine, and there is no, I would say, no light in the end of the tunnel, because the policies in Ukraine don't change, and Ukraine desperately needs to change in policy, because what it's doing strategically is not working, and that's just a very short summary. So I'll give you an example. In Ukraine, there are territorial defense brigades. What they are, they're really just very light infantry, poorly trained, poorly organized, lacking in any heavy equipment. So for the most part, all they have is just machine guns, obviously assault rifles, and mortars, maybe a couple of cannons. That even those are usually they're not like howitzers or anything like that. There's something of relatively low caliber size. So they are no match, and they have no place at this point, this stage of the war, on the battlefield. Yet Ukrainian military command using them to plug the holes. Just there was a sort of, not a scandal, but situation in Ukraine where there is 123rd Territorial Defense Brigade, and one of the battalions of that brigade was holding the flanks of 72nd Brigade, which was defending in Vuhledar. And actually, one of the reasons that the collapse of Vuhledar happened, and one of the explanation is that Russian command wisened up, and they figured out that we can hit in the weak flanks, and in that way we can capture Vuhledar, and that's exactly what happened. So they hit at this battalion of 123rd Brigade, which fled the battlefield completely, obviously making a huge hole. And the commander of the battalion had honor, and he shot himself, which is obviously very sad, because apparently at least person had honor. That's already a good sign, which is rare thing these days. So this is just giving you microcosm of how things are poorly planned, organized, thought out on Ukrainian side. And just for those who think that this is some kind of like rocket science with Russian, command there. It is not. This is a textbook example from probably any military textbook, which is based on Battle of Stalingrad during World War II, where exactly that thing happened at huge scale, where German troops were concentrated around Stalingrad, and but the flanks were were filled with let's say Hungarian, Italian, Romanian troops, both flanks on both sides, and those troops didn't have an adequate equipment to fight Soviet troops. And so they penetrated, they breached through this Hungarian, Italian, Romanian troops, and that's how the encirclement happened in a nutshell. So you would expect that people would know that stuff. Apparently they don't realize it, and that's how Vuhledar happened. And this is not just one example. Similar things were happening in the past. I'm just bringing up, fresh example. And so the also consequence of all of this is that the battalion that was to be sent from that 123rd Brigade again after the collapse of Vuhledar, they simply refused to go to the front line. And this is really, as you can imagine, when you have a battalion that's refusing to go to the front line, it tells you a lot about the motivation and how people feel. So, and that's the same how, let's say, this also from, if I borrow analogy from history, this is how let's say Russian Imperial Army was collapsing in 1917. So the soldiers were refusing to go and fight. And I'm not blaming them. I'm not trying to say that there's something wrong with those people. It's what they do is very logical, given that they have no chance on the battlefield against the Russian army, given the lack of equipment, poor command, poor training, poor everything. They essentially it's a let's say one-way ticket, right? Pretty much guaranteed one-way ticket. And so they refuse to do that, which is, I would say, normal and in some ways probably appropriate. This is the first sort of canary in coal mine where at this point this is fairly large size unit is sort of publicly disobeying, because this was obviously on TV in Ukraine and so on. And so there's probably, and there's no changes are coming, so there's more of this coming, and this really means that the large-scale collapse of the Ukrainian front line, not that far away. I cannot predict, nobody can predict that when that thing exactly is going to happen, but it's very clear that Ukraine is heading in that direction without any changes. That's the most highest, the outcome with highest probability. That's how I describe that. Now let's do a walk through the front line in a clockwise fashion, the way I'll always do. So first, let's jump to the situation in Kursk region of Russia, where essentially things are largely not changing. Russian command, they're not rushing. They need resources elsewhere, and so they put some pressure on Ukrainian troops, but it's not strong enough pressure for now. The next location is north and northeast of Kharkiv. Things here also on pause, stalemate. As I mentioned many times, both sides don't have resources, and so Russian command resorted to simply destroying this town of Ovchansk, which is completely senseless activity. Now let's look at the situation on the North Luhansk section of the front line. Things here so far somewhat sort of stable, and I would say it's a temporary stability. Russian troops continuing their push. The most sort of dangerous situation is where Russian troops are nearly near on this river Askil. If they will manage to establish bridgehead at that point, that's going to be very negative development for Ukrainian defenses in this whole area. And unfortunately, Russian troops are not far away from that. Now let's look at the situation on the North Donbass front line. Things here somewhat stabilized after recent Russian advance, where they captured this Verkhnyo-Kamensk. So far, there's no new advances so far here, which is already a good sign, given the whole situation of Ukrainian troops. And then in the southern sector, Russian troops attempting to continue sort of move forward westward around Chasiv Yar without large scale any meaningful progress that I will be able to show on the map. Now let's move to the central Donbass front line, where things really, as I mentioned many times, the worst. So so far the focus shifted of this whole operation by Russian troops into this, I would say, southern sector, where starting from Vuhledar all the way to south of Selidove. So this is where Russian command at this point is focused. Russian troops are on approaching Bogoyavlenka, so probably by next video they probably will be there and will be assaulting that village. But the more important right now, let's just look at the situation around Girnyk in south of Selidove. So this is a little bit updated situation, and so far it's the advance of Russian troops clearly slowed down, but it's still happening. And the more important part is that Russian troops are pretty much close to breaching between Novo-Selydivka and Izmaylivka, and obviously the pass is sort of in this south-western direction towards this whole water reservoir. And to essentially, the idea is to cut off all of these Ukrainian troops in this area, or just force their withdrawal. And the unfortunate situation is that this town Girnyk and Kharkiv here, they're actually pretty good defensive positions. And so this is obviously the reason why Russian troops are sort of not attacking as much in this area where I'm showing, but they're actually trying to create either encirclement or threat of encirclement and force withdrawal. And so far they moving slowly but surely in that direction. Once this falls and clears out, there's, as I stated before, the next step would be moving westwards, and the next step actually would be Kurakhova and Selidove, and that really means that Russian troops will move westward and then south and north. We're obviously not quite there, but that's where things are going to be developing, and so far these developments over this past 4 days are pretty slow for Russian troops. Now let's look at the situation on Zaporizhya front line. Things here are more or less stable. No major Russian advances. There is some pressure, obviously, in this area of in the Velika Novosilka area, because now this is sort of new cornerstone of Ukrainian defense in this area, and it's very clear that Russian troops would want to That's their next goal, let's put this way. And the way they're going to do it, not from the south at this point. The flanks close to be open, so they will try to attack it from flank. But the rest of the situation are more or less stable. Now let's finish with situation along the Dnipro River, where things are stable as they always are. That's all for today. Thanks for watching, and until next time, bye bye.